with us. So he's heading the International Water Management Institute, and I will hand over to Dr. Arif to say a few words about operations research tools in irrigation.
Do I have to go on? Okay.
The laptop will be 3 minutes effect here, that you find out.
I did warn you earlier when you said it's going too smooth. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arif, Anwar, and I work for an organization called the International Water Management Institute. IMI, as I call it, IWMI, is a research organization, research for development. It's not for profit. IMI is headquartered in Sri Lanka, and then it has offices in various countries, including Pakistan, Tashkent, India, several countries in Africa, and Southeast Asia. And I head up the office here in Pakistan. I won't tell you much more about IMI, but if you are really interested, technology works. I'm not going to repeat that whole introduction. Okay, is that better? Okay, technology is working now. Right, so a little bit about myself first. Some of you I've had the privilege of meeting, but in case many of you I haven't, so this is the first time. My first degree is in civil engineering. Again? We won't hold it against you. We won't hold it. It is the School of Engineering Sciences, so. And then I went on to do a few other things. That's what the ... is. I won't embarrass myself or you by telling you what I have done, but I'd like to think I've kept myself busy over the years. Work-wise, I actually started my career in a very traditional way. Somebody who graduates from a university in Peshawar. I went to work for the government. I learned a lot. I also learned that I hated it. And so I didn't last very long. I left after about 6 years. Worked very briefly for the US Embassy. I didn't like that either. So I left that after 3 months. That's probably my shortest job. And my longest job has been at the University of Southampton in the School of, well, what is now the Faculty of Engineering and the Environment. I used to look after the civil engineering program and teaching and research, very much like it. And about 4 years ago, I joined the International Water Management Institute, which is where I am now. And our office here in Lahore is based in Turkanias Bay, where the Orange Line is being constructed, and it's absolute nightmare. Well, only the office. I'm very apolitical. I'm not going to say anything about the Orange Line. Hardly for me to say. Professional-wise, I have certain memberships, like most of you who will or have graduated. The reason I put the last 3 there is because, other than what I'm going to talk about today, I have a very, very strong personal interest and passion for professional issues in engineering education. And so most of my voluntary time, the time that I give up for free, is around these 3 sorts of things. That's where I give up all my time. It's a bit ironical, because I always say that the American Society of Civil Engineers doesn't really need my services for free. They can probably get a lot of much better people. And ABET, for those of you that don't know ABET is the equivalent of, most of you have heard of Pakistan Engineering Council, right? That it accredits degrees, including the ones. ABET is the equivalent in the US. So they go about accrediting degrees. And so every so often I fly all the way to the United States and go and visit universities and accredit their degrees. Now they don't really need me. I enjoy doing it. It's a great opportunity for me to go there and interact and talk to people inside universities and that sort of thing. So I'm very, very passionate about that sort of thing. For my sins, and if in case you're interested, I did, and that's another story for another time, for another hour, and not necessarily in an engineering school, maybe. I did do my licensing. So I'm licensed to practice as an engineer in California. So if you're interested in professional issues and licensing, maybe you'll get a chance to talk later on. But that's not what today is about. Today is about operations research, which many of you know is a branch of mathematics. It's like calculus, like algebra, anything like that. And I'd like to talk about what I think has been my niche area. It's an area in terms of research I've been working on for many years. When I was at Southampton University, I supervised quite a couple of students towards PhDs on this. It's about applying those operation research in the same way that you apply any other branch of mathematics to your problems in any branch of like engineering or environmental science or anything like that. Notice I keep referring to the word environmental sciences to be more inclusive today. I'm really just going to talk in 1 hour, probably about these two, because these are very much about irrigation, water management in context of Pakistan. But if we get time, or if you're intrigued by this one, the stable marriage problem, I'm quite happy to talk about that. But that's engineering, that's education again. So if you want, we can talk about the stable marriage problem. Not in a very philosophical context, in the context of operations research. It is a very specific operations research topic. I can get the snickers and the laughs, and I can take them, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. Okay, so this is related to work that we did in two areas. One of them, project location 2, actually we had the privilege of working with colleagues from LUMS as well, Abu Bakr in particular, and his team. But this work is slightly different. We had these two locations because in terms of irrigation in Pakistan, they are quite different in some key characteristics. And I'll explain that in a moment. So the first problem is applying operations research to project location 1, as I call it, and which is very close to Tarbela Reservoir, the Pehur Level Canal, as it's called, so Soabi area. And project location 2, southeast Punjab, right with the border with India. A great place to do field work. You carry your big fiberglass cases with their equipment, and you get the rangers coming after you, you know, arresting you, and great fun. Never a dull day working in Pakistan, I can tell you that. So that's Tarbela Reservoir, and this is the area that we were working in, Pehur High Level Canal. A bit of background on this. So irrigation engineers. Very often you'll hear this word, the terminology is water allowance. It's the capacity of the system per unit of land, or 1,000 acres is usually what they use. An acre is a bit too small. Now, one of the big issues, other than that I should switch off my phone before I start these things. Generally speaking, Pakistan's water and irrigation is what I call deficit by design. It never really was enough. It was designed simply to spread the water, and there's a whole philosophical debate around that. So if you look at these canals here, these canal systems, you see that they sort of hover around the 3 to 4 mark. This is cubic feet per second, which is discharge, per unit of land per 1,000 of acres. And then you've got these three over here, Upper Swat, Lower Swat, and Chashma. These are all in KP, and they're considerably more. There's considerably more water per unit of land up there. You might argue and debate about this. It has to do with the way that the water accord, water apportionment accord, and the fact that in the KP, there isn't very much land that is easy to irrigate, simply because of the topography. So the little bit of land that they do have, they pile all the water into that. So if you happen to be within this area, you're relatively well off in that sense. It introduces an interesting set of problems, as you'll see in a minute. As a result of this, somewhat as a result of this, because especially after the Accord, there was this additional water bit, a lot of this infrastructure has received a lot of investment. These typically tend to be large development banks, multi-million-dollar loans. So they've all received a lot of investment. And I have a few pictures, since we can't take you to Peru in 1 hour. I'll try and bring Peru to you. I have a few pictures. This is by far the most sophisticated canal system in Pakistan, by far. And its price tag was just under $150 million. That's what we spent. You'll be paying this loan back, by the way. I'll probably be long gone, and you will, I can guarantee you. So that's the good news, you know, of today. Now, interestingly enough, and this applies to any service, you can generalize this to any service. I'll give you some analogies. When a service becomes abundant, people tend to use it when they need to use it. Think mobile phone, think internet, think cable television, that you will switch on your television, switch on. In water, particularly irrigation, that is called on demand. Drinking water, potable water is like that, you turn it on. When you run into a situation like what we have over summer with electricity, where you don't have enough, the minute you get the electricity, you turn everything on. If you turn on my air conditioner, cool the room down, turn the water pump on, you know, you just use it all. Now, so behavior changes depending on how much of the service is available. What I've plotted here is time, weekly. And I've just got two bar charts that go up to 100%, dark blue and gray. And this is a survey we did, observing farmer behavior. Every week, this is the warabandi system, so they get water once a week. Like you get water every 12 hours in a, sorry, you get electricity 12 hours in a day in summer or something like that. I'm warning you about next summer, it's just as bad as the last one. So, here, what the blue line shows you is farmer behavior. How many irrigate, use the water, as to how many, the grey ones, abstain. And you can see that in summer, everybody is irrigated, almost 99, 100%. But then as you start to get to this part of the season, which isn't obvious from this graph, but this coincides with maize being harvested, so there's nothing much on the field going there. It starts to drop, then it picks up again, as you start to get other crops being harvested, and then it drops completely down here, because this is when the system is shut down for maintenance. But it also coincides with fairly low demand. Now this happens when water becomes relatively abundant, so you won't see this sort of behavior necessarily in the Punjab, because it's like electricity. You only get it for a few hours, you're going to use it. You're going to turn on your refrigerator, your deep freezer, all the lights, everything. Just do what you can. Do your ironing, do your internet, do your printing, everything when you get electricity. So you just use it 100%. Now, is there any social scientists in the room, by any chance? Yeah, everyone's good. Got some, right? Anybody else? No? So, social scientists, when they see this, particularly when it comes to human behavior, because that's what social science is very much about, is about, well, why do they behave this way? Is it rational? And they use, in social science, they use the jargon, in no derogatory way, I'm using the word jargon. Human beings, or they're rational agents, there are rational reasons for doing this. Well, if you're from the biophysical background, engineering and likes, you try to find biophysical explanations for this. This is what, in the water field, we call evapotranspiration. The amount of water crops actually need. And I haven't, even, at this point, even adjusted it for crops and taken out rainfall and all the other subtleties. I've just done a very raw cut at this. But you can see that, you know, even if you did a simple regression or something, you'd explain quite a lot of this behavior. Basically, farmers are rational agents. They can recognize from years of experience when their crops need water, and they are taking decisions. And the interesting thing is, with all due respect to many of my irrigation engineers, presumably none of them are sitting in this room, very often we have this argument about farmers being illiterate and therefore dumb or something to that effect. That is not true. I could probably not match my behavior as well to evapotranspiration as they do. So I think they're doing pretty darn. Remember, they have no instrumentation whatsoever. This is just look and feel. They can feel the soils, they can look at their crops, and they can tell. And, you know, if you put in instrumentation and you gave them information, they probably wouldn't behave much better because they kind of already have all that information. They know how to do it. Okay, there's no operations research so far. It's coming, trust me. So, this is the canal. And by the way, if you haven't visited this place, it is a very nice place to visit. I highly recommend it. Picture perfect blue water. Not this stuff you have in Lahore canal. This is really nice stuff. Very cold. Very green. No, a bit conservative. You know, that's KP for you. I am from KP, by the way. I'm not from professional speaking and all that, so I can say those things. I don't have to be that politically correct. Anyways, this is typically what you call a tertiary unit or a chuck. Here's a little outlet, so the water comes from here. The reason I show this is the way that this works is downstream of an outlet, this becomes sequential. So one farmer irrigates, does his turn, then the next irrigates, then the next, so it becomes sequential. Upstream of this point, it is simultaneous. So upstream of this, you'll have lots and lots of outlets. On this canal, because of the topography, everything's on one side, your left side. Anyways, so the outlets are flowing simultaneously, but downstream of an outlet, it becomes sequential. And typically, each field based on the area gets a certain amount of time. So it starts on Saturday morning at 800 hours, and then they work out and everybody gets a certain amount of time. Graphically, you can represent that like this. So this is farmer number 1, number 5, 26, 14, 8, just identifiers. And they all have a designated time on which to start or which to end, and they all know this. And if you ever go out there, it's really nice seeing. You see, and sometimes they have these big clocks. They can use their watches or something. These nice little alarm clocks, and they're sitting there. This is done very, very rigorously. It's interesting because we did compare these numbers that you can get from the government departments with what is officially practiced. And you do read quite a lot of literature, including literature from INI, I have to say, that says that there's complete anarchy. That is not true at all. It is amazing how well this is institutionalized. And amazing to me because whereas we violate every single traffic regulation that there is on the road, guaranteed, every red light, every green light, every yellow line, everything, even though the cops are watching. Nobody's watching, and this is working over 14.3 million hectares. It's actually quite, I think, remarkable how robust that institution is. And the only pressure is social peer pressure. It's culture. It's this neighborly thing and all, which is absolutely remarkable. Now, here comes the operations research bit, he says. This is actually, you can structure this as what's called a machine scheduling problem, an earliness, tardiness machine scheduling problem. Because what happens in practice is somebody decides to abstain. That's what's happening, right? I showed you in the graph before, lots of abstain depending on which time of the week and year and all that sort of thing. Now what happens in practice is, because the origins of this come from the time when there wasn't a lot of water, and this may be true of the Punjab and all, but now you get a lot of abstinence. You saw that. Sometimes it's 80% abstinence. The way the agencies manage this is just to continuously supply water. They make no adjustments. So you get the water going into the canal and pretty much coming out into the drain, particularly night times. It just goes straight in and straight out. Now sitting in the Punjab, this is a bit difficult to imagine. Because in the Punjab you have so little water for the amount of land, or as Pathans like to say, you have so much more land for the amount of water you have. We never say you have not enough water. I should refrain from these things, shouldn't I? Anyhow, so it's a bit difficult to imagine, but this is the case, that there is actually a surplus of water and water goes into the drain. So, what if you could move things around? So you readjust all these times and recalculate all the timings, and then shut these outlets and all, there and then. In this particular canal, if you did shut the outlets, there is the infrastructure, the water would stay in Marbella Reservoir. So you save your water, sort of thing. This, as it happens to be, excuse me. So this is basically, now you're getting into water ordering. So at the beginning of the week, somebody would have to say, I would like so much water on this day. And then you have to prepare this schedule. That's where the link comes with machine scheduling and the earliness, tardiness problem and all. So let's get into a bit of set theory and all that now. There are no equations in this, by the way. I don't do equations. I'm not that smart. A set of n independent single operations. So you saw these colored boxes. I prefer colors and boxes. My little brain can cope with that better than all this sort of stuff. But anyways, single operations job is available. This is cut and paste, by the way, not from my papers, from somewhere else. These are independent jobs. That's what you're trying to schedule. And they're available for processing at time 0, which basically means at the beginning of the week, you've got these water orders. There are many examples of the machine scheduling. Aircraft landing at a runway is an example of a machine scheduling problem. Painting cars in a paint shop is a machine scheduling problem. An operating theatre is a machine scheduling problem. There are any number of that. And all I'm doing is trying to show the analogy between a problem in Peru and machine scheduling. That's what I'm trying to do. You know the job descriptors in advance. The duration. So when somebody places an order, they say, I would like water for 2 hours. Or maybe you decide the rule is 2 acres, 2 hours, 1 acre, 1 hour. It's not up to you, but you know it in advance. What the duration is, and either the start time or the end time. So that's what I mean by the job. And that is true of this problem as well, the one that I've just described to you. The machine is available continuously. So you saw that machine, that is basically the water channel, or it could be the paint shop, and it has to do all these jobs sequentially. I'll come back to this point. In the original definition of machine scheduling, machines are not kept idle. So you notice that I put all the jobs, to use the jargon, contiguous. Put them one back to back. I'll come back to that because there are variations of this. And jobs are not preempted is another way of saying this, but jobs are not interrupted. So once you start a job, once one farmer starts irrigating, you can't stop and things, which is unlike possibly processors, computer processors and all, which is another example, another application of this sort of thing, where you can preempt jobs. Another thread comes in, and I don't know very much about these words. If you're interested in literature, I think it's Baker and Scudder, actually 1974, is probably one of the earliest papers where they define the earliness, tardiness, machine scheduling problem. So, coming back to my particular problem, we have a farmer that chooses to abstain, and then you can reschedule. Now, I'm going to violate one of them. I'm actually leaving some idle time. So, as you can see, I call it idle time. And here's the thing, when you speak to farmers, and again, they are rational agents, even though they are happy to move when they start irrigating on, they probably don't want to irrigate at night. It's just unpleasant, it's pretty cold, and all. So your problem then becomes a little more complex straight away, because there are sort of, in the machine jargon, machine downtimes. There are times when you don't want to use that machine. So then you've got to start thinking about, well, how do I introduce, and it's usually by daylight hours, how do I introduce this in such a way? Remember, the target always here is, again, part of this idea that the job information is known in advance. In a job ordering system, a farmer would tell you when they want water, so their start time, or what you might call the target start time. You may not be able to match that. Let's say everybody wanted water at 9 o'clock in the morning. You just don't have the capacity to do that. So you're going to have to schedule some jobs early and some jobs late. And that's why it's called an earliness-tardiness problem. And then you're trying to minimize that earliness-tardiness. So it becomes a minimization problem, hence an operations research type problem, with all these constraints, that you can't preempt jobs, you can't run 2 jobs at a time, that you must finish all the jobs before the end of the week, in our case, the duration, sorry, the interval, the entire interval, and so on and so forth. So there are lots of constraints like that. That would then, you'd recalculate the end time. There are any number of, so that's avoiding nighttime, or potentially your cousin's wedding, or any other particularly cultural, social times where you don't want to be irrigating. As I said, I've been doing work on this book for many, many years, and you can start to add any number of layers of complexity. So in the previous one, the constraint was sequential. But there's no reason why it shouldn't be like that. You could have a water course, and as long as you had splitting type infrastructure, you could have 2 people irrigating at the same time, or 3 people irrigating at the same time. A simple version of that is that even when you split, they get the same discharge. So 30 liters per second one side, 30 liters per second to the other side. So we call that, he says we, this is the royal we, it looks like we, the same reason. I call that the simple multi-machine. Multi-machine in the sense that you've got three machines. These are hypothetical machines, they're not real machines in any sense of the word. Simple because graphically I've represented it as they all represent the same discharge. So the farmer's getting the same flow rates, 30 liters per second or something. Again, this could be 3 paint shops, or 3 runways, or 3 operating theaters. It could be anything actually. That's why it's an abstract problem, and that's why then you can bring the mathematics reason. Again, I've left idle times. thing. It's interesting because there's quite a bit of a debate on this idle time. So, you see, imagine that this farmer number 25-2 wanted to irrigate at this time, which is roughly, let's say, for argument's sake, Tuesday on 14:04 hours. Supposing this was the target start time and the actual target start time. So there's no earliness, tardiness. Zero.
This time, the idle time.
This white.
Filling of water course?
I'll come to that in a minute. That's the next complication. And there's an analogy in operations research. This idle time is simply your for whatever reason, either because it's night time, cousin's wedding, whatever, but there's another aspect to it, which is that if this farmer wanted to irrigate at 14:04, by providing that water at 14:04, you're matching the target start time. You're giving the service when the service was asked for. So you reduce earliness, tardiness to zero. You really minimize it to the absolute value, which in operations research usually numbers are positive numbers. So there is this debate that, but if you did not allow idle time, you would either have to move this job up here or that. So you're introducing earliness, tardiness simply because you're not allowing that. You're putting in that constraint, if you like, that you can't have idle time. So there's this whole debate about whether, having a scheduling problem without idle time is really an earliness tardiness problem, because you're introducing earliness tardiness by doing that. Now to answer your question. In operations research, and this is true of, think of a paint shop. So you painted one car that's red, and now you're setting it up to paint the next car that's white. Or you might be setting it up to paint the next car that's red. If you have to wash all your kit to change that, there is going to be a setup time. And that setup time can depend on what you were doing first and what's next in the sequence. What sort of operation in an OT are you doing now, and what are you doing afterwards? Have you just landed a jumbo jet on your runway, which takes a long time to taxi off and all, and then it's going to be followed by a Cessna or something? Or something smaller, whatever, sort of thing. So that is called, in operations research, that's called sequence-dependent setup time. And in irrigation, time to fill and all that. And so I've just got an example for those of you that are not too familiar. Completely hypothetical. I've got two farmers on a single water course, irrigating sequentially. The water comes, user 1 abstracts water, user 1 stops irrigating. Now notice there's a travel time. That's your sequence-dependent setup time, your filling time. And then user 2 starts irrigating. Now supposing you reversed it, supposing it was 2 first and then 1. 2 is irrigating, 1 can start almost immediately. No setup time. That's why it's called sequence dependent. That adds another layer of complexity to your problem. But it's all there, it's all defined even in operations research, all of these. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. And then you can add one final layer of complexity. This is again multiple machines, but now when you split the water, one farmer has a choice to get 45 liters per second, and the other one 30 liters per second. Graphically, something like this. So this, remember, is the discharge along these axes. So these two would be the same. This one gets it for more time, less time, for greater discharge, and so on and so forth. And for want of a better word, we call this complex multi-machine. And then you can add the setup times and the idle times and everything into that. All sounds great, right? We've got this mathematical abstraction of this particular type of problem. Unfortunately, this is the Clay Institute, by the way, Clay Mathematics Institute. If you haven't heard of it, it's a mathematics institute. They have 7 problems. They call them the Millennium Problems. And if you're motivated by money, there's $1 million prize if you can solve any of these. So, off you go. This is your way to get rich.
One has been solved.
One has been solved. The 6th one.
Yeah, yes.
There you go. So, hope. I didn't know that. Thank you. So there's hope. I wasn't kidding. Off you go. Start thing. The machine scheduling one, unfortunately, falls in this category. And it's actually very difficult to, computationally at least, it's very difficult. You can define it and all, but computationally it's very difficult. I've used, obviously, just as a benchmark, I've used instant programming, but then you have to branch off into genetic algorithms, simulated annealing, and all that sort of thing. I must admit I have had very limited success with some of these. When you start to relax all these constraints and everything, I manage to solve problems with 4 farmers or something. So it isn't going to get implemented tomorrow, unfortunately, at all. There's no easy algorithm. Computationally, that's what I said. Computationally, you can't. You can structure them and define them. You can study properties and so on. Yes, yeah, that sort of thing. So that's kind of just to give you where like I am with these things. But for me, and this goes back to one of the paper journals that I write for. This goes back to about 2002. There's a forward in it. There is very little, unlike. I mean, if you take logistics, obviously operations research is widely used, partly because that's kind of the industry that gave birth to operations research, logistics and the traveling salesman problem and that sort of thing. But increasingly, in managing quite a lot of infrastructure, we do see operations research being used. And even in the examples that you get in many of these solvers, whether you use Lingo or GANs or CPlex and all, you'll see a lot of, certainly logistics problems, and a few others. You'll see some in water resources, but in irrigation engineering, it still seems to be a bit of a novelty. You'll get someone on the academic side doing it, like me, but the practice, it doesn't seem to be able to filter. You know, somehow beyond algebra and a bit of differential equations, this kind of stuff doesn't seem to filter. So for those of you doing research, of course it's great, because it offers you a nice little niche area to carry on working. And if somebody cracks this, then this would solve a lot of problems, not just this one, this would solve. Well, all of these would. That's partly why the Clay Institute has put $7 million or 6. Okay, so I still have another 25 minutes of your time, your captive audience. Let me take you then to another example and another application. This is project location 2, far less water now. Really, I mean, it's a desert, let's be honest. We're watering the desert down here. That's what we're doing, and growing cotton and wheat, mostly. Sort of thing. So that's just a close-up, and you can see the border there with India, that sort of thing. It's called the Hakra Branch Canal area. Just again, a very quick introduction there. The warabandi, it's a system by which this is managed. One of the things is they take a decision every week, and in the example I'm going to quote is 17 canals. They have to take a decision which one to switch on and which one to switch off, just like with electricity, because they don't have enough water. And it's not the size of the canal, it's the land there is relatively cheap and it's easy to dig and it's oh yes, yeah, this is very typical. It's not unique. It's not typical in KP, but it's very typical of all of the Punjab, how it's managed. So this is a key decision, and I just want to emphasize, it's not because of the infrastructure. They could make the infrastructure wider. It's because we don't have the water. No, we have too much land for the water. That's the correct phrase. Don't quote me on that one. So the agency, they have certain guidelines and heuristics. I'll talk very briefly about that. And they prepare these plans, they're weekly, for the whole season. Summer season, Arif, and then winter season, Rabi. They're generally qualitative, so they don't really have numbers. And I guess this should really read equity. They try to be equitable, fair, in the way that water is distributed. And I'll talk a little about that. So I'm going to try and show you another example of how you can use operations research for this application as well. That's really what I'm trying to do here today. It's fairly large. This is what I call IMI's field laboratory. It's quite large. It's about 500,000 acres. And it's got 17 distributaries. This is the plan. This is what they produce for every canal system, for every season. I'll just try and explain bits and pieces of it. What they do is, in this case, remember, we've got these 17 distributaries. They are put in these 3 groups. I won't go into the subgroups. A priori, in advance, before the season starts. And generally, the idea is that they try and put them in groups such that the total capacity is broadly equal. So 3 equal-sized groups. This, in my jargon, I call this explicit grouping. So you explicitly make the groups, and you'll see why this is important, because It's not what the operations research application does. And then this bit is what they call the rotational plan. It's weekly, so these are the dates, the from to dates. And essentially all that's happening, oh sorry, they're the dates here. These columns represent sort of priority levels. 1 being high priority, medium, and low. So if they have enough water, they will run all canals in group B. And then if they have a little left over, they'll run all those in C. And if they still have some more, they'll run those in A. That's how it runs. And then it is what you call round robin scheduling. BCA, 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 and stuff like that. It's just round robin straight. So it's very simple. It's a heuristic. It's a guideline, and generally speaking, it works. Okay? So that's what you're presented with. Now the next challenge is translate that into operations research. Because that's it. That's all you're given. You've got some data and all. And when I used to teach at Southampton, I used to say that one of the most powerful skills, well this was to 4th year students, that you can go away with is being able to translate problems into mathematics. If you acquire that skill, and it really is a challenging skill to acquire. The difficulty with it is because from childhood, you tend to learn maths as a subject, and you're given the x's and the y's and the z's, and solve a quadratic equation, and you come with b squared minus something. I can't even remember it anymore, but anyways, you get the point. Or you're given some algebra, and you simplify it. But taking a problem that is defined completely qualitatively like that, and translating it into some form of equations, everything, and then having the math skills, the differential equations, so whatever it is, to be able to solve that is a very, very powerful skill. Very powerful. But it takes a long time to do. I think it takes a long time. But it's like translating in many languages and stuff like that. Anyway, I'll show you my translation of this. I'm sure there are many. I'll just show you my translation. So, here's mine. Don't think I have anything to add. I've covered what I want to on that. I won't go into these details of subgroup. They're not really central to the discussion. But in the operations research version, there is no explicit grouping. So I don't bother with any of that. I throw that all out completely. No explicit grouping. No priorities. I throw that out as well. You might say, well, what's left? Well, not a lot, actually. Don't need to use that. And I come back to the principle that the purpose of this rotation is you don't have water, you're trying to give everybody a turn. And you might argue that that is fair, right? It's a bit like most of you would say, if I get 12 hours of electricity and my neighbor gets 12 hours of electricity, that's fair. I don't like it, but it's fair. Would anybody disagree with that? I do. Have you ever thought why that might not be fair? Anybody? Exactly. I know for a fact that my driver, when he gets 12 hours of electricity, uses far less electricity than I do. So how does that make it fair then? And they are probably 6 people in their house and I'm only 3. And I still use more electricity than they do. Fairness is actually, and equity is very challenging to define. It's a nice idea, but actually to quantify it is very difficult. And there's this whole body of literature in econometrics, because that's where equity really comes up. Sort of thing.
But why without any land?
Yes. Yeah. We could go into a long debate about whether that is equity or not. I want to grow rice. It's not enough for my rice. As opposed to, you can get into all sorts of debates. Yeah, please. Not necessarily, not this one, no. This is really to try and apply operations research to this operational plan. That is their priority. The agency that manages water, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, their scope is limited to distributing the water. How you use it is up to you. And it's a more philosophical debate. In many services, electricity, gas, telephone, internet, I am pretty sure that none of the agencies that distribute that care how you use it very much. You might get on your gas bill, please don't run your boiler kind of stuff, but they don't really care. The water agency says the same thing. We distribute water, how you use it is up to you. Get smart, use it productively. You may agree with that philosophy, you may disagree. That's a slightly separate debate, though. But go on. Yeah.
High, medium priority zones are defined for maximization of production.
No. Let me rewind and clarify this. These are these groups of canals. High simply means if we have water, we will definitely give canals in group B water. Full stop. What they use it for, they'll probably still use it. This is all the same area. It's all cotton and wheat. So they'll still use it for cotton and wheat. And then if we still have some more water left over, we'll run all those in group C. And then group A. The following week,
Will you be dividing these groups? Like this will be a high quality, this will be on what basis, like
the groups are chosen explicitly in advance, roughly around trying to get the total capacity. So the capacity of the groups, when you aggregate them, is roughly equal. That's what they do. And then this is simply round robin. There doesn't seem to be any reason, particular rule, heuristic, around choosing B first, C and A. You could do them in any way, but then you simply cycle them through. So you could do ABC, 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 you know, or stuff like that. All you're doing is that if you take group B, it was high priority, the next week it moves to medium, the next week it moves to low. If you take A, it was in low, then the next week it's high, which means if you didn't get water last week, you're definitely getting it next week. That's all. And it's not about productivity at all. Okay? So let's just clarify that, and I better hurry up, because you're not going to get a stable marriage problem, I'm sorry. Another time. You really needed that one. Okay. So, you know, coming to this philosophical point, how do you measure inequity? Not in a very broad context, in the warabandi context. You need a variable, right? When you're talking about income inequity, it's usually money per person, per household. So you need to decide what is your X variable. You can choose any number. I won't bore you with, but we sort of zeroed in on this one, the volume per unit area. Per unit area, everybody should get the same volume of water. That would be equity. It's a plausible argument. There are lots of reasons why you might disagree with that, but it's plausible. So let's run with that one. Otherwise, for the rest of 15 minutes is talking about that. Okay, now you've got your X. Now you need a bit of a formula, a statistic, a summary statistic. Because, I mean, think of this room. How many rupees do you have in your pocket right now? You know, lots of X's. Now I need a summary statistic. Average, mean, range, and all. Again, there's lots of literature on this subject. The one we use is the Gini, because it's nice. It varies between 0 and 1. 0 is perfect equity, 1 is inequity, Lorentz curve, all that sort of thing. I won't bore you with that. So that's the variable and the Gini. Now, I don't actually use the Gini. I use a sort of function of it. That's the Gini. It has two terms. There's this inequity term. This simply is the absolute difference, how much money, and subtract and take the absolute value, but you compare everybody with everybody else. So you get a matrix, you know, sort of thing. And then this is a sort of scaling term, the second one. The scaling term adjusts to make it population independent. So my Gini would work in this room, but it would work in a smaller room and a bigger room, because it varies between 0 and 1. So you get this n squared term and the d average and so on and so forth. So it makes it scale independent and independent of units, so you can use any units. For the purposes of operations research, it's kind of nice to get rid of that term. Because when you're maximizing, scaling doesn't really matter. It changes the value, it doesn't change the arguments. I borrowed this, I stole this idea from a paper by Dresner, and they used the Gini to look at facilities equity. So how do you locate a BHU or a hospital so it is equitable in distance-wise as a measure of equity? So again, another application and just drawing in from that. So my objective function is going to contain basically that term, and I'm going to try and minimize. The decision variable, so that's the only equation I have, by the way, don't worry, is which canal to open and close, so it's binary, 0, 1. Again, you might argue, well, I could probably surcharge my canal, so I don't really want one, but at the moment my model is constrained. You might say I could probably run it a little under capacity. After all, Wanda does this with you all the time. Have you checked the voltage lately on your electricity? My goodness, it's all over the place. You know, burning out your appliances left, right, and center. So you can actually, even canals, you can run them. So it's a bit of an artificial constraint. The objective is to minimize the inequity. I also have to allow for a little spillage. Spillage because I've got a certain amount of water coming in. I've got sort of integer values for what's going out, and sometimes they're not going to match up equally, so my problem ends up being infeasible. But I do try and keep that spillage to an absolute minimum. So I've got... No, not so much in this case, but this is the distributor in the main canal. So this is a distributor in the main canal. But spillage is, imagine that you have 100.3 coming in, and when you operate certain canals, you've got 100 going out. So the 0.3 is that spillage. So you want to keep that as low as possible, but if you say that inflow must equal outflow, you could end up with infeasible, because 100 is not equal to 100.3. Maths doesn't like that. You and I, we sort of say, yeah, chalo, guzara karo type thing, but maths gets a bit fussy about these things. And then there are any number of constraints. I have listed them all. Must remain open or closed. It's binary. Total discharge cannot exceed. Volume balance, mass balance type thing. I could tell you a story about volume balance from yesterday, but I won't. I'm running out of time. Okay, this one. Here are the results. Remember, no explicit grouping, no priorities, nothing. Here's an output. So I've got all my weeks, and my model tells me run this one, keep that one open, keep that one close, open, close, open, close, open. No, I got it wrong. Open, open, close, so on and so forth. But you get the idea. And then this one you can see almost alternates. 1, 0, 1, 0. Close 1 week, open 1 week, close 1 week. And in doing so, remember this is minimizing inequity and minimizing spillage. And here are the summary figures. In the first week, it's quite high, the Gini, 29%. But in the following week, it looks at the previous week. What did I do last week? Or in the 2 weeks, it says, what did I do in the last 2 weeks? And by the time you get to week 21, this is 23 weeks, or 22, 26 weeks. By the time you get to 25 and 26, it's looking at all the decisions it's taken previously. And then choosing a decision. So your decision space is of about 324. So you come down to about 9.3, and fairly low spillage values, 0.03. That's just an example. From that very qualitative sheet, you can apply operations research, and you can get outputs like that. And you might say, and this is where I come back to this definition of what is fair. Now, you might say, well, actually, I really haven't had time to think this through fully, so it's a bit unfair. But you might sort of say, well, I can kind of get what you're doing, and this sounds quite rational. And I'm a rational agent, like most people in this room. But fairness often is about perspective, about that driver I referred to who uses far less electricity than I do, kind of thing. Let me skip through this just in the interest of time. So, what you might have not realized when I put this graph up is this person, a farmer on this channel, gets water every alternate week. This farmer got water twice in a row. This farmer was off twice continuously, consecutively. But then you've got farmers 3 weeks in a row. Hey, happy farmer. Look what's happening here. In fact, that one stays open consecutively. How fair is that? Exactly. See? Lies down, lies in statistics, right? The Gini is just another statistic. I'm sorry. And that's what these histograms show. These shows the consecutive weeks that a canal is scheduled to remain closed. Now most of them, 78% remain closed for only 1 week, which means the next week they definitely open. But you get about 1% that are consecutively closed for 4 weeks. Now if you're a farmer and you're growing crops, well that's the end of it. It's all over. 4 days without electricity in summer, 42 degrees Celsius, it's going to tax you. You don't care about the Ginis and the equities and the operations research. I'm not interested in your clever science, go and take it somewhere else, I just want electricity. What about remaining open? Again, the bulk, about a quarter, remain open for 1 week. But there's 1%, actually one, that remains open continuously. And remember, this has optimized the Gini. Because it's looking overall, it's looking at the overall pattern, not individual canals. But from an individual's perspective, bit of a problem, sort of thing. So again, plenty of opportunity for more research, to expand, for your MSc projects, etc., etc. We did do, I don't have time to introduce this, we actually did look at a couple of models. The one I just introduced is that one. There are other ways of formulating this. You are limited by your imagination only. So if you can't figure out to do it, it's only because your imagination doesn't allow you to do it. And you can look at, so some of our other models actually, first week interval Gini is considerably lower here. Final week is relatively comparable. All are better than what we observe, the current practice, but I won't go into the details exactly of that. Spillage volumes are quite small. Relative, this one's a bit on the higher side. Under observed practice, they report no spillage whatsoever. And just a summary of that. And with that, thank you very much. Some acknowledgement there. I'm quite happy to take any questions, or I can talk for 5 minutes about the stable marriage problem, or I can just keep quiet. I really want to talk about that. You noticed that? No, I'm only kidding. Yeah, I guess so. Shall I do the question, or you want to?
Scheduling the GPUs like with these scheduling time for each one. I mean, we talked about
No, in this one, it is the model itself is taking the decision which one to operate, basically to minimize inequity. In the first week, it's a bit difficult because it has no prior knowledge. So it simply has a certain amount of discharge and it's just trying to allocate that, which is why in the previous one you'll see it's quite high, the inequity, because it's almost random. There are lots of equally good or equally bad solutions, snake eye condition as we call it. But then as you go forward, the only thing it's doing is minimizing inequity and minimizing spillage. So there's no a priori grouping or there's no a priori sets or anything like that. The decision is purely based on equity. It's interesting, I think, given that the approach is so different. To me, when we did this, what was really quite telling was these two, I haven't talked, these two use a particular sort of heuristic, the kind of thing, these two models here. This one is completely different in the way it approaches the problem. And yet the results are quite comparable. The numbers are quite sensible in that respect. But there is no round robin or anything like that. Yeah, I think that's the purpose of this talk, is to try and show you that there's this group of people and they have these skills and techniques, and it has application in this particular sort of area of our lives, if you like, which is in water. That's when I was having this discussion with him, like I said, will this be of interest? And he said yes. And that's exactly why I'm trying to introduce this, that you can look at this qualitative sheet, and if you're creative enough, you can bring your skills and tools and techniques to apply to bear and improve on it.
There was something called frequency optimization of warabandi. At the end, you say 1%.
Yeah.
But this is happening in actual scheduling of each sort
It,
What more fair is it?
Yeah, but actually, I have a related question. So can you pull up the map for the Hakara branch area? And so if I remember correctly, the one that we are talking about which remains open all, that's HR, right? That's the long finger where you should understand that, right?
probably, yes.
So, yeah, so this is HR, right? It's the very, very last one. Yeah. The very tail. So isn't that supposed to be the poorest area of the...
It is.
And at the very tail, and your analysis is saying that that is the one which is getting
that
sort of low.
if you wanted to minimize the, you see, yeah, if you wanted to minimize
What
the,
I mean to say that then there must be a reason that the irrigation people are running it for such extended period. Because they seem to be making up for something.
they don't, I mean, for them, HR is part of the rotational thing. So they don't, they do close it. They do close it. What this is suggesting is that that one could remain open, and you would still get relatively high levels of.
So what this is modeling.
Yeah.
What actually happens like this?
No. There are some that do run. When they have very small channels, see what this doesn't do, it's not necessarily, I mean, it's not strictly speaking correct, let me try and explain this. Where they have small channels, they often don't even have the infrastructure to regulate. So those run continuously. Those do run continuously in practice as well. But here, I'm assuming all of them are 0-1. All of them, you can take decisions to run them or not. It is very easy. I mean, we've done some more work. You can put in additional constraints to force things to flip around. So, maximum 2 weeks consecutive, maximum 3 weeks consecutive. But as you start to build in those constraints, your equity takes a hit. Your equity does take a hit. But I mean, there's huge opportunity to refine. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time that somebody's tried to apply this kind of rigorousness to this problem. Otherwise, it's been done this way for the last 150 years or so. And it's been done really reasonably well. No, I wouldn't argue with it.
What is the way that they come up? How do they come up with this guy? Is there like a SOP or a...
Well, it's basically this sheet, and it's very easy to build this.
So
Just round robin. That's it. Yeah, just a round robin approach. Basically, it's just a round robin. Yeah. Everywhere. Yeah, this is the standard tech. This is the state of the technology at the moment out there, and this is, well, whether you agree with it or not, but this is the potential where what we, I feel like, as researchers and academics can do the same sort of issues and problems.
Can you differentiate between premier channels over here or non-premier front channels over here? And
yeah, it's quite simple because, bear with me, let me bring the next one up. We have actually done this, so if I can bring the results up. Yeah, sorry. So this channel, FC, represents flood channel. That does not run in Ruby. Now in an operation tree, it's very easy, you just constrain it to 0. So that one doesn't go from 0 to 1, it just is 0, which means it stays shut. It's quite easy to do that. If you want to change the channels so that they can operate in a range around 1 and still keep the problem as an LP, then it's a little more challenging, but it can be done because I think we've pretty much cracked that problem as well, and you get better results with that as well. There's quite a lot around availability of water, particularly also with groundwater and crop production and that sort of thing. But what we were doing here was simply addressing this much more constrained problem, because we are research for development. So we're also under a lot of pressure to show that our work has relevance. And if you, from that perspective, if you start to produce tools that don't address people's needs, their day-to-day job, if somebody turns around and says, I'm not responsible for crop production, so I do not want to operate my canals to optimize crop production, so you've given me a tool which I do not need. I need a spanner, you've given me a hammer. So then you don't see your work being utilized and all that. So you do have to try and understand what they are doing and what they are trying to do. And it's a poor excuse, I know, but it's a more philosophical debate. Again, I use this word a lot. Here's the question. In many countries, and economists and all would certainly agree with this, you use your natural resources where you can optimize the returns. That makes a lot of sense to everybody. That's fine. Then you have areas which are very poor. Now in other countries, many other countries, what they do is they allow Starbucks, Google to make lots of money, and then they try and tax and redistribute wealth. Right? We don't tax agriculture. So if you gave the natural resource, essentially it's water because, what's my phrase? Punjab has more land than water, something like that. If you give the water to those people, they will become wealthier and wealthier, and if you're not taxing, there's no social redistribution. So then the poorer cousin, and it's that argument about excellent being the enemy of the good, don't make excellence. The excellent solution might be use the resource because the country would benefit. If you grow more wheat and sugarcane and rice, the country would benefit. There's no doubts about it. The economy would benefit. But then you have social redistribution. If you don't have social redistribution, then the next best thing is possibly share the resource more evenly. Social redistribution of the resource. But then you take such a, sometimes, I mean, people argue against that because you take such a big hit on your economy. You know? But if you haven't been, you would have to go to Southeast Punjab, go to the area that Bakr is talking about, Dr. Bakr is talking about. Go and look at those people and ask yourself, okay, if I take out the water from them, what do they have left? Nothing. Because trust me, the land there is worth nothing. It's the water that's worth nothing. So it's a big philosophical debate, you know. And that's the beauty of places like this. You can have these kind of arguments and questions and all, and you know, explore these sort of ideas. You mean the dots here? Oh, that's simply because the table was too long. So there would just be too many. It was just as an example that, you know, there are 26 weeks and it produces one each week. Sorry, I should have explained that here. That's just dot, dot, dot. Oh, short name, because these have long names, Baku, Shah, and Balsa. You know, they have long names, which again, just in the interest of presentation, I thought. But there are 17 unique canals. And when we were collecting data around them together, we had a short name and a long name, you know, like your initials and your full name, stuff like that. It was just that.
We have a couple of people here who have office of these names.
Oh, I see. Okay. They know these names well. Okay. So I do apologize. It's laziness and presentation on my part trying to keep the table relatively constrained.
Yeah, that's very easy.
8 right, on the right side. Yes, no, there's a very logical. They are, okay, they are actually from memory, although it bears no thing, they are actually sorted by capacity. So these are the largest down here and the smallest up there. I haven't been sort of, it's not like I've taken the ones that go out to India. None of them go out to India. At least not on the surface. There's a big debate about groundwater going to India or not, but that's for another time.
So let's have the last question.
Yeah, what analysis done, trying to analyze the present daily values value according to the present real-time distribution of the water there.
Yeah, that's the one I tried to, but I had to rush at that point, so I apologize. Yeah, this is the observed data for that particular season, which was really 2014.
The one in practice right now.
Yeah, observed. So when you take the observed data, the data that's, I'd have to double check whether this was our independent measurements, because we, through LAMS, did an independent measurement of all the data, or whether I think from memory it is our own data.
You start your model from the present values and you put your model to the 26 week and organize.
Yeah, that's right. So you take, we say, okay, if we had this water each week and we knew in advance that that is exactly the water we would get, how would the model distribute this water, and how did they actually distribute it in practice? Again, emphasizing that the approach here, for this one in particular at least, is very different, because I threw away quite a lot, you know, while I was going through the translation, as I call it, into mathematics.
Let's thank Dr.